Relish, pleasing or zestful flavor.
A quantity just sufficient to flavor, to be pleased or gratified by, enjoy.
We are hoping that what we bring to your table today might add some spice to your life.
Welcome back to another episode of Relish. We have a special edition for you guys here. On my left is Don Patterson, as always, and on my right is Marcus Miller, longtime history teacher at Hillcrest Academy, soccer coach. So I've been around him quite a bit. So,
And you talked about the stock market game and he was the one that brought that to Hillcrest at that time,
right?
And that's been fun. Kids enjoy that. We hear a lot of chatter about it.
Yeah,
and that was through Marcus, dear brother Marcus. So the other night I had this 4:00 in the morning when you get up and the Lord says you ought to do something. And so, Marcus, you're here by invitation because the Lord woke me up at 4 a.m. Does that mean a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I guess it's a good thing.
We're going to find out, aren't we? Well, I also asked Marcus to bring along these coats. And one of the things that I think we often gloss over, maybe we need to make more part of what we're doing, is we come from a background of faith that where our plainness has been, our dress was affected, how we did things was affected by our faith. Am I right, Marcus?
Yes.
And so I have your great-grandfather's or grandfather's coat.
My grandfather's.
Grandfather's coat. It's a transition coat.
Yeah.
This was the transition coat between being Amish and Mennonite. And back in the time, 60s, 70s, even the administrator at Hillcrest, what was then Iowa Mennonite School, would have had to wear one of these. There was sort of so your dad would have had to wear one of these.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't be in that position, right? So what happens when we as Christians, one of the last questions in the episode was doing the kind of things that reflect our faith.
Right.
And so what happens to us as Christians when we do or don't do those things that reflect our faith? I guess I'm thinking, do we follow the world so closely now that our dress isn't even addressed? I mean,
some of the time.
When you get dressed in the morning, Rowan, do you think about, okay, does what I'm putting on today reflect my faith? Is that even on the radar?
No, most of the time I just grab what's on top. But,
yeah. Well, that's good enough. Yeah. You're looking sharp. So should it be? Marcus, tell us about the history of how things have progressed, maybe just for your family, like the story behind this coat.
Yeah, my grandpa Miller, Dan H., for anybody that might remember him, they moved here. They moved to Iowa from Holmes County originally, and then Howard County, Indiana. And a year or two after they moved here, they left the Amish and joined the Conservative Mennonite Church. He would have continued to wear a plain coat. If you saw my pictures of my grandmother, she continued to dress much like an Amish person dressed. And that was part of what it meant to be a member at, I think they went to Fairview and then Sunnyside when it opened up, was wearing that uniform.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you mentioned, that transition happened in the 60s and 70s. I had an uncle who was a principal at Iowa Mennonite School then, who didn't wear a plain coat, but he wore a coat and no tie.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't wear a tie.
Right.
That was part of the rule, and they were members at Sunnyside at that time.
Yeah.
And then now you see very little talk about dress other than at school when we talk about being modest.
There is. That's true.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember when I was first in the Mennonite ministry, going to conservative churches, and I still had a tie on, and they'd say, well, maybe if you're going to preach here, take the tie off. And so I just kept it buckled up, but didn't wear a tie. And that's 45 years. So there's been a change in that period of time.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess I'll come back to the question. So what do you think, Marcus? Should we be wearing straight coats yet, or blue jeans are good in the pulpit, or I'm being ornery?
Yeah, as you know, I grew up hearing the verses from Romans about being non-conformed to the world, and that was often one interpretation of that was through how we dressed, and when problem is the legalism that comes along with that, or that came along with that. When I was a student at Iowa Mennonite School, girls that were in the conservative church still had to wear their coverings to school. And some of them talk about how painful that was to have to wear their covering during phys ed class or at other times. And for the girls, it really put a lot of attention on them because I didn't have to wear a covering. I wore blue jeans and T-shirts, kinds of things. And I didn't look different as such. Not wearing a tie was not a problem for me.
Really? Okay.
In fact, I was maybe in choir. The rule was if we attended a Mennonite church, we had to wear ties for our performances if we didn't wear the robes. And the director just assumed I was a member of a conservative church, and I didn't tell him otherwise.
Miller, conservative, right?
And most of my relatives were members of Upper or Sunnyside or Fairview.
Okay.
So I just didn't enlighten him. Didn't wear a tie.
What's not said is not a problem, right?
Last night I was thinking and I had no idea where this was going, but I used to ask students every now and then if they've ever felt different because they were Christian or if they ever felt different because they were Mennonite. And when I first started teaching, if I asked that question, the kids at least the Mennonite kids would say, yeah, we felt different because we were Mennonite. Now the kids look at me and like, why would you ask a question like that?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? That's not that many years.
Right.
So the passage that you talked about is Romans 12, and it's verses 1 and 2. Verses 2 is the one you're thinking of, that don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and prove what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So are we hurting ourselves by conforming so much to what the world around us looks like? What do you think, Rowan? Should I get you a coat?
Maybe. I might need a coat, and then I'll have some more words to speak here, but I think, I don't know. I think as long as you're being modest, I don't necessarily have a problem with wearing sweatpants and a hoodie or whatever, but that's also all I've grown up with. So, I mean, when I was younger, then sweatpants weren't really a thing, and so it was jeans.
Right.
But for most of the time that I remember, it's just like sweatpants or...
And I guess I'd hate to take your generation back to where the generation before ours was at, and the pain that they had with that conforming. The thing that I noticed, though, is as Amish walk down our sidewalks, they do dress differently, and they stick out. Hopefully not like a sore thumb, but it does make a statement to the people who are watching.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be easier to make a statement through dress? Or is there an easier way to not conform any longer to the pattern of this world? Is there an easier way than dress? I mean, I've always said it's cop-out, because if you dress a certain way, then people realize you're dressing that way for a reason. We'd had a conversation in our ministers group the other day that nobody can really tell who a minister is unless they wear a collar. And so there were certain situations like prisons that we thought, well, maybe we need to wear a collar, not for our safety and for some respect and being set aside in a prison situation. What do you think? Is there times we need to do that? Dress different?
I would think like dressing different is probably one of the easier ways to
It really
just
is.
show that you're a believer in to be different than the world. Like you just make that one decision in the morning of what to put on or right before you go out, but like your actions, you're constantly making decisions, and some of them are just unconscious, and
Yeah.
you're not gonna be necessarily as successful
Right.
or as consistent as just making the one decision in the morning.
And of course, actions, you said, make a difference. So we don't really have accidents in this community because we have such a high Christian population, right?
Right.
No car accident and no road rage, right?
Definitely not.
I was two stories. One is from my early years teaching at Hillcrest. Now it was Iowa Mennonite at the time, and the principal, or it might have been Dwight, the basketball coach, then got a phone call because two guys wearing IMS letter jackets had been in a store and done some inappropriate things.
So they stuck out.
And so they called the school, and there was this discussion about, if you're wearing things that indicate the school you're from, we expect you to act in a certain way.
Right.
Another story, one time I dropped, I think it was a group of seniors, and they were doing the 3-year life thing that they sometimes did in Christian family living class. And I dropped them off at the mall, Coral Ridge Mall, for lunch, and a lady saw the Iowa Mennonite School on the bus. So she comes running up to me and she says, "Am I going to see some Mennonite kids in their clothing inside?" And I said, "Well, you'll see some Mennonite kids in your clothing, but not the clothing you expect." And she says, "Well, how will I tell who they are?" And I said, "Well, I hope you can tell by their behavior."
Yeah.
But it is much harder.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And we would hope that would show. That then brings it back to us. And how do we as Christians conduct ourselves in such a different way that we don't conform to the world because we're transformed? And yeah.
I like how I think it's Eugene Peterson that did the message. I like how he translates those verses where he talks it's not about so much being different, but it talks about not being apart from your culture, and being, on the one hand, being aware of your culture, and then being apart from your culture. So to me, when I think about that, it means listening to people, being respectful, in our culture where it's like the louder you talk, the more you yell, the more coarse language you use, the more you get attention.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's not the way a Christian should speak or act.
Yeah. What's interesting in this discussion, as we've had it, I've seen the pastors go from being very formal on Sunday morning to the Rick Warren look, with the Hawaiian shirt and the blue jeans, and then move more towards the polo shirts. And then what I found in a recent Pew research is that Gen Z expects that their ministers show professionalism in their dress when they come to the pulpit. I thought, So it's sort of gone around.
And I saw an article recently about the number of young men specifically attracted to the Orthodox tradition, where I believe they wear robes. And
That's right. So are we going full circle again? So, and it's interesting historically how that's often happened, how you start at one spot, and because of what happens it comes back around. So I'm back to wearing ties on Sunday morning.
I know I've heard some people say that they like it when their pastor doesn't wear like a suit coat and a tie, but yeah.
We break with that once in a while, but
right.
For the most part, I haven't worn the full suit I start that in the fall.
Yeah.
So, can we get our head around that everything we say or do is part of our gospel, part of what we're preaching? The passage you cited, Marcus, in chapter 11, it talks about all the wonderful things God has done. and sort of a doxology, if you will, of what God has done, and it's a laundry list of things that he's done. And then it starts in verse 1 of chapter 12. Therefore, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, which is your action, spiritual action of worship. That's where verse 1 goes. Then it says, no longer conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test, like a senior in high school, God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Man, how can we capture that better? If it's not dress, it's got to be action. And if it's action, then it's so fuzzy. I don't like fuzzy things. I don't like things that I can't get a handle on for description.
Right.
Are there concrete things that we can do beyond our dress, beyond being modest, that would actually be Christian actions that grow out of our spiritual worship? Marcus?
Well, that book you're holding in your hand has some guidelines, right?
It does have some guidelines.
Jesus tells us not to turn the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
Paul has all kinds of advice in Galatians and Ephesians. And
yeah. We've been working on the fruits of the Spirit.
Right.
A lot of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, if we actually lived at Matthew 5, 6, and 7, we would look different and act different. So, yeah. Well, let's just serve an experiment, see how three of us work together.
So at what point did our ancestors start conforming, I guess you could say? Or was it us? Or like why was that?
So some people would argue that the initial dress the Amish had when they started in the 1680s was the dress that they had, and then they just never really changed.
Oh, okay.
But then, and the Mennonites and others continued to change and adapt with the times with some changes. Facial hair is another one. I asked my grandpa one time how long his beard got when he was an Amishman, and he says, well, he kind of chuckled, and he said it kept breaking off. He also couldn't get married until his hair, the Amish bishop refused to marry him until his hair on top was longer because it was too short.
It was too short.
And so that's another issue now. So it's, I think the big changes more recently were in the 60s. And I think you see that reflected. I'm not a theologian, but I think you see that reflected in, Mennonites have historically borrowed from lots of different people and media. We've borrowed from lots of folks for good and bad. And I don't know that we've always thought about the implications of that.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. So thank you, Marcus, for coming on.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bringing the coats.
Yes.
I think it looks like Don enjoying that, but
feeling very patriarchal right now. Very Paula,
pious. Do you feel very pious?
Oh, yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know if there's somebody else that you want to be featured. But if not, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Feel free to become part of this ministry by sharing it with others. Our goal is to help each other grow deeper in our understanding of who God is and His calling to us in our daily lives. Thank you again for joining us, and may God bless your day.